Bonjour from Paris. Things did not go well for the Pacers on Thursday night here in Paris as Victor Wembanyama had a complete game. The Spurs did too. They shot nearly 61%, a percentage that you're just not going to beat a team at that level, including 50% from range as the Spurs throttled the Pacers on this evening. 140-110 was the final here tonight in Paris, and it was afternoon back there in Indianapolis. And it was a game for much of the first half. Now, the Pacers did not play well over those first two quarters, but a tale of two halves, certainly. The Pacers went into halftime only down by a possession there. But then in the second half, it was bad. I mean, really bad, because the third quarter happened as the Pacers had probably one of their worst quarters ever. Maybe not the worst, but it wasn't by much, as they gave up 45 points in that third quarter, the most by any opponent in any quarter this season. Remember, 45 points. The Pacers themselves scored 22. Therefore, they were outscored by 22, as the Pacers only scored 23. It was that bad, as the Spurs made 17 of their 27 shots in that quarter. They made 7 of 10 from outside. They outscored the Pacers in their own game 10-0 in transition. It was never really close after that in what was a blowout second half. What we did see instead and hear were MVP chants for Wemby, of course, as he returned back home for France. We all know that this was the focus of these games, as the Pacers and Spurs playing here in Paris for not one but two games. The first time in the NBA Global Games where they have played two regular season games during one of these visits. Usually it's just been a one-off, but I think it's much better to have a two-game set here. You've already made the trip. You can make more out of it. The only negative in all this, as I've written at fieldhousefiles.com, the disappointment, of course, is the fact that it's an Eastern Conference, Western Conference team. So both teams are not seeing their respective teams and hosting them inside their arena. So for the Pacers, that means season ticket holders who are shelling out thousands of dollars this year are not getting to see Wemby in person. But okay, it's a one-off. And this is something special in particular for the 21-year-old who will very soon be the face of this league. A sellout crowd here, though, of nearly 16,000. It was 15,935. Was able to enjoy a sequence in that second half where they saw Wemby, in fact, block 3 consecutive shots, then go down on the other end, leading to Spurs baskets. Would have had 4 straight blocks, except one of them, I believe it was on Nesmith, was a goaltend. Otherwise, that would have been 4 straight blocks, leading to points at the other end. The Pacers' disposition just was not good, to use one of the words that Rick Carlisle often repeats. They did not respond well. They did not play with good energy. They clearly got frustrated. They clearly let their emotions get to them. They didn't have the answers, and you could see it in their body language out there after they were punched in the mouth. Did not provide much resistance whatsoever in that second half with the Spurs and what they were doing and being so efficient. The Spurs were shooting the ball, racing down the floor, scoring in transition, but also getting stops. And there's certainly some tweaks that this Pacers team can do over the next couple days leading up to round 2 coming up Saturday right back here at Accor Arena in the Paris area. And there's a lot more you want to see. I'm not surprised, and I kind of like to see the dejection, the frustration on so many of the Pacers and coaching staff's faces as they walked out of the arena and loaded up the bus, because as much as this trip is about the experience, it's about bonding, it's about this once-in-a-lifetime, perhaps, trip. Now, I guess Miles Turner went to London with the team, and guess what? That was a blowout as well. And so the Pacers historically have not done well in these overseas trips. They have not done well when on national TV, and so they'll try to change that coming up on Saturday in the rematch. That one is on ESPN. That is a game where it's also here overseas, and so what kind of changes can we expect? Now, the teams have had about 4 days between games on the front end. The Pacers will have about 4 games on the back end before their next game. I think they go the 25th. They play back here at Accor Arena, then they're off till the 29th against the Detroit Pistons. So a lot of time in between then and now. Now remember, this Pacers team was red hot. They had won 14 of their last 18 games. They'd have won 8 of 9. They had won 2 in a row, whereas I think the Spurs team had lost something like 4 in a row or 6 of the last 7 or whatever it was. There were 2 teams going in very different directions. And in this one, it was not just the Pacers defense, even though that was the overlying concern, even though that has been the issue for this Pacers team previously this season and also historically, really over the last decade. But it's interesting because this is a subject matter I've been wanting to get into on fieldhousefiles.com and on the podcast. And right here, of course, and that's defense and how that's evolved and how they've been much better in that department since about early December when they did not advance this year into the NBA Cup and the NBA Cup Finals and go into Las Vegas. So that in turn gave them a nice steady break from like December 9th to maybe the 15th, I want to say. Something like that, about 5 days. And they were able to recenter themselves, focus on the defensive end, make some changes, of which Rick Carlisle doesn't want to completely share, but he's getting the buy-in. He's getting the commitment from several players, especially a guy like Benedict Mathurin and Jarris Walker on that end of the floor. Tyrese Halliburton, you want to see more of that as well. But this was just not a good Pacers performance all game long, but certainly in that third quarter, allowing 45 points and only scoring 23 yourselves. This is probably the most telling statistic in all that when you want to talk about the highs of the Spurs and how bad it got for the Pacers. Consider the fact that the Spurs had 43 assists in this game. 43 assists, incredible number. I think if you're having a really good night, you're probably 33 to 35. Well, in this one, the Pacers finished with 44 field goals. 44 field goals. Spurs had 43 assists of like 58 baskets. So the Spurs moved it well. Shots were certainly falling as well. They had some luck and some fortunate shots and also high percentage shots inside the lane and then also some kickouts. But this is on the Pacers as much and probably more than anything, again, which is why I want to see how they'll respond coming up when they do it all over on Saturday. Again, it'll be an earlier game, 6 p.m. local time, noon for those of you back on Eastern time, back home again in Indiana. Miss everyone, but all of us are having a great time here in Paris. I've explored a great ton, been able to cover several events that the Pacers have been involved with. Not at many of those that they are at, but I've heard a lot about them, especially the Golden Gala that was, I think, Tuesday night, a couple nights ago, where it was a formal night, a black tie event. Then there was a community relations event. Then there was a practice here. And so many other things that the Pacers have been involved with, including several of the team going to the soccer match Wednesday night. I think there was about a half dozen of them there. Tyrese Halliburton had a Puma event at Foot Locker. Aaron Nesmith had an event for New Balance, who he's sponsored with. So there's a lot of different things that these players have chosen to get involved with and are able to do to make the most of their trip here. But ultimately, this is not like it was in 2019. It's not. That was a preseason trip over to India, to Mumbai. Those games truly did not count. That was mostly about bonding and getting revved up for the start of the season. These count, and the trouble is, as I alluded to earlier, is the Pacers had been on quite a roll. I was asked on radio this week, was I concerned given the layoff both between the games coming here and the games going out? I really am not, just because the biggest issue with this Pacers team all season long to this point has been health. It's been so many guys out, and while Aaron Nesmith clearly still on a minutes restriction, I expect that probably I wouldn't mind seeing it for a couple more weeks through the All-Star break, but maybe here after another week he can come off of that after this trip here and still limiting his minutes. This team's relatively healthy except for the Achilles guys, which is an unfortunate nickname, I think, for Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman. The good news is they are on this trip. They're able to relish. They're able to enjoy in this opportunity to be here and take part in what this team knew they were going to have back in April when it was announced during the first round of the playoff series. I will say, going back to this game, I thought it was notable how Rick Carlisle, talking in his pregame press conference, he's been in the league forever. He played there, played in the league, notably with the Celtics, won a championship, then in a coach, won a championship, has been coaching, 25 plus years in this league. So he totally understands the moment, what this is about. And in this game in particular, how it was about Wemby coming home. It's showcasing him. Remember, he had a star player in Luka Doncic previously there in Dallas. They realized, I think they went overseas, maybe to Slovenia a couple of years ago, since Carlisle left, I think, for a preseason games to showcase him back home. Well, this is all about Wemby, and Carlisle joked pregame, he hopes that Wemby plays well, that he plays a complete game, and that he gives these fans what they're wanting for, but ultimately not too good of game, because that would ultimately be at their detriment, obviously. But overall, it was just a complete performance from Wemby at both ends of the floor and what he was able to contribute. A game-high 30 points, a game-high 11 rebounds. He had 6 assists. He had 5 blocks as well, and he was only needed to play just over 32 minutes. So for the Pacers, they got his A game, and they're hoping they don't maybe get that coming up on Saturday as they do it all again. And again, I saw a lot of frustration for these Pacer players. They're going to sit on this overnight. They're going to sit on it all day tomorrow leading up to Saturday's game because the fun in Paris is over. Now it's strictly about business, and we saw the Spurs turn it up a notch and really lock in. We did not see this same from this Pacers team. The energy was lacking. The responses were poor. They were not efficient on the offensive floor. They kept attacking and going inside, especially younger guys, smaller guys rather. On that sequence I referenced earlier in the game, I think it was Shepherd that attacked the paint, then got blocked. Then it was maybe McConnell that attacked. Then it was Neesmith. Several counters you'd like to see coming up in the next game too, for the Pacers to have much more success on that end of the floor. I am the only Indy reporter here and made the trip to Paris. Wouldn't miss this one. What are we doing here? A fantastic opportunity to cover the team, to see the city, and tell unique stories as the Pacers continue on their journey of this season. And this is just one of those games, but how will they respond coming up on Saturday night will be the key story. Of course, all my work's primarily at fieldhousefiles.com, but make sure you're also following along on the social media channels, Twitter, of course, but sharing a lot more stories, Instagram stories right there on the IG. But there have been a lot of newsworthy items to come out of this trip already, including Obi Toppin proposing here in Paris. There's also another Pacer staffer I heard that proposed as well. So that had to be special. But I talked with him about it, so I'll have that story coming up. But you don't want to go home 0-2 on this trip against a Spurs team that was reeling, that they were sputtering. That was the case for the Pacers tonight. But they also did some sightseeing. Again, their Golden Gala, some activations in the community, their approach to this game entering in. We'll get into all of that, but it definitely had to be tough for the team owners with Steve Simon, Herb Simon, Stephen Rails sitting courtside with team executives as they saw their team blown out in that second half in what was a 140-110 loss here at Accor Arena. First of 2 games in Paris. So again, how will the Pacers respond? How will they refocus? What things will be addressed coming up on this next game? That's what I'll be paying close attention to, as I'm sure you guys will. At least this game, though it's an afternoon game, it is on a Saturday. So hopefully more of you will be able to watch, and it's also on ESPN as well. Benedict Mathurin leading the Pacers in this one with 24 points. I thought he was the one bright point for the team. He was assertive. He was comfortable. He even took the mic pregame and speaking in French. He's fluent in French. It's actually his first language, he was telling me yesterday. And he played well. Did not get that same contributions from everyone else as this Pacers team shooting just 45% from the floor. They were out rebounded. They turned it over 11 times. But get this, Spurs turned it over 20 times, and it didn't really hurt them too much. They still took just one less shot than the Pacers. Both teams almost taking 100 in this one. But it's not very often you'll beat a team when you're shooting 60%. It's not often you'll beat a team when you turn it over 20 times. But that was the case tonight for the Spurs, who blew out the Pacers in game 1 of 2 here in Paris. For fieldhousefiles.com and the Fieldhouse Files podcast, I'm Scott Agness.